Hello, hello. Good to see you. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Well, very excited to be with you here today, Emily and Fatiha. Thanks for everyone who's here. You know, DEI has a bad rep. 2025, who would have imagined that after all the waves and the buzz and all the media attention and action that happened on DEI over the last 7 to 8 years, would be in 2025 actually almost having it as a taboo in a conference. That being said, it's a crucial topic, and very, very happy to be here today with Emily Witt and Fatiha Gas. Maybe before starting, just like a quick, we're in the Startup Tech Conference. We're all talking about pitching. Can you do like a 1 or maybe 2 minute little introduction on yourselves? Emily?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Emily Whitko. As you can hear, I am from the United States. And as Elias mentioned, it is particularly a fraught time for DEI. And happy to discuss any questions that folks may have afterwards. I was even chatting with my colleague Bridget here when I was promoting myself for this talk about whether or not I should even use the phrase DEI while tweeting about VivaTech, which is just not a thought I ever expected to have. I'm a head of culture at a tech company that many of you may have heard of called Hugging Face. We are an open source AI platform with a particularly adorable logo. I'm focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which ties really tightly with employee experience. And since we are an open source platform, I also tend to work really closely with our contributors and folks that also use the Hugging Face site.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fatiha Gas, and I can say also thank you to Solène, who is a colleague, and he's here with me. I'm head of innovation and generative AI program at La Poste Group. La Poste Group is very committed in the subject of diversity and inclusion since many years. At La Poste, I don't work on these subjects, but I have other activities aside, and I'm involved in some associations which are very active in attracting women in tech fields, and another one which is very involved in giving a positive vision of diversity.
Thank you. And my name is Elias Benjeloun. I've been 3 times entrepreneur, the last startup being Stay 22, that is a scale-up now at 50, not as big as Hugging Face, but like 57, 58 employees. It's leveraging AI to allow publishers and bloggers to move from a side project to a lifestyle business. So using AI and generative AI to actually optimize their blogs and generate more revenue. So, helping small businesses. And on the other side, throughout my journey, I had the opportunity to launch an organization that supports entrepreneurs with peer-to-peer learning and helping them continue their journey even when they fail or they exit. It's called Elan Tech, as well as working in a big company, closer potentially to La Poste, called Desjardins, that is a financial institution in Canada, a cooperative. So a lot of human values, triple bottom line, and of course, the challenges and opportunities around diversity, equity, and inclusions are core to that business as well. So, little pitch. Okay, so we talked about the taboo aspect a bit around this topic, and maybe before jumping into the future and allyship, as the topic here is really moving into an environment where maybe compliance is not as strong. But how did we get there? Sometimes, I talk with people and they are a bit flabbergasted about how did we move from a situation where it may not have been relevant to even bring those topics and bring those structures to a moment where we cannot even talk about it? Like, what's happened?
I think that if you look back through a particularly US history, I would be shocked if this has not also happened in France and all across the world. There tends to sometimes be this boomerang effect that happens. So if we think back on the last, maybe as you mentioned, 7 or 8 years, particularly in the US, we had the Black Lives Matter protest, which was spurred on by George Floyd's murder. We also had the Me Too movement, which was very, very popular in the US. And so we had these very strong social movements that were gaining a lot of traction, and we were talking about DEI in a brand new way. And then all of a sudden, the boomerang happened, and everybody sort of, like, you just get snapped back, right? Folks get afraid of losing the power that they've spent decades, centuries, lifetimes holding on to really, really strongly, that all of a sudden they go, oh no, Me Too is getting too strong. We have to get rid of Roe v. Wade and abortion rights in the United States. And so these boomerang effects happen, and in some ways it's useful for me to remember that, because it's one of the things that continues to give me at least a little bit of strength. On some days I'm a little bit tired, but it's good to know that despite feeling like this has never happened before, we're probably in the middle of one of these bounce back moments.
Yeah, I totally agree. To figure this situation, let me give you some numbers. A McKinsey study reveals that companies with higher ethnic and cultural diversity in leadership teams are 33% more likely to outperform financially. And we forget this. We forget the link between diversity and financial performance. This is about diversity, ethnocultural diversity in a company, but we have also, like you said, Black Lives Matters, we have also Me Too, and these are other subjects, other issues from the society to the company, which bring another vision of the situation also in the companies.
Yeah, and I like that you're bringing numbers as well, because facts matter, and sometimes we're in a society where you don't know where are facts, where are not facts, but also we realize that facts also don't matter, in a way that, unfortunately, if we knew that only with data and facts we can change the minds, we wouldn't be here today. And you're right, like on that percentage, and I think it's crucial, but I think one of the mistakes that we tend to do in this kind of like pendulum or like boomerang effect of change, because, you know, humanity has been changing forever, basically, like evolution and whatever. But when a big social movement like this one happens, we have people who genuinely believe in that. And they've been working in companies like La Poste, and even before Hugging Face even started, etc., who are really deeply passionate by that. But they get crowded by people who are just following trends, and who arrive in that kind of spaces with a conviction maybe a bit different, and we become in a more performative state of DEI and a more social club-ish aspect of DEI that becomes disconnected from the business. I think moving to the future, because we're here beyond talks, because I know there are a lot of talks during VivaTech, but there is also a lot of action. So how do you see the action that can be taken so that we move away from the performative aspect of DEI and looking good, where true leadership can happen, and the performance aspect of DEI?
At the beginning, I think companies went to this to answer this question because it was just like, oh, it's compulsory, we must do it. And we moved from this situation to another one where people, it's just like they have understood the benefit of diversity, the diversity of gender, of gender and diversity of ethno-cultural background. And today, a lot of people are aware of the situation and the power of diversity in teams and for the business. And they changed their mind about this subject. And we don't treat the problem or the issue of diversity in the same way, because more people are involved in this subject, and more people want the change.
If I can build off of what you said, I've been thinking a lot about this since November 2024.
Of course.
Coincidence, just a coincidence.
Of course. Just a coincidence.
When the backlash.
And this is not, I really hope not to offend anybody in the room, because I am fully guilty of this. I have created those mandatory anti-bias trainings. I have forced companies that I've worked for to go through all these different DEI trainings. And what I've found, and then the point that I finally reached, is that with the help of reading some research, for example, we now know that mandatory bias training is not actually successful. It might actually have a negative impact because it's creating stereotypes in people's minds that they may not have even thought of before, which is just wild to even consider. But what sort of I'll call like old school DEI in corporate settings tried to do was change policies and small individual actions within companies, whereas the only way to actually achieve change is to achieve it structurally, right? So I'll give another example of a policy that we used to use at many of the companies I worked for, which was almost like diversity hiring targets. Right? This team needs to be 30% women. But what we didn't account for was retention, or what is the culture, what is the structure going to look like when those people arrive? And so the focus needs to be much less on mandatory trainings and just talking about DEI and thinking about how we can actually change the structure of a company. We're probably not in a position right now where we're going to change the structure of laws or the structure of things that are required. But in your own spaces, you can start to think about, what does this little house that I live in with my colleagues look like, and what can I do to change the structure of the building?
Absolutely, but I may disagree with you a bit on the aspects of structural versus organic. I'm more of a proponent of organic aspects, of getting the movements going and making it natural or become natural. Like one of the aspects, and obviously I agree with the structural aspect, but I find that sometimes in policies, when we're trying to actually enforce something or go faster by throwing money at a problem or by creating a department of DEI and HR, DEI, etc., my view, and I may be blunt on this, but it's garbage and it's more detrimental. Because what it creates, it's silos, and it creates teams of the oldies or the white old folks who may not even understand this whole language, and they're like, okay, if you are this, I'm psychologically putting not a stop, but like a break on that, because it's too uncomfortable. It's too much, one shot, uncomfortable, so my brain locks. Whereas if you do it in an organic way and involve that and interface, etc., like for example, what we did in some hiring, instead of saying like, oh, we need to hire this amount of people, would be like, hey, we need to interview this amount of people. So it's still performance-based, like may the best win, in a way, with the biases and everything, but still you work ahead to make sure that you do the extra mile to get more women, for example. And one of the, just to finish on that, like one of the aspects what we had was, for example, when you hire for a senior leadership position, you have more men applying for it versus women. So inviting the HR people to consider the people who may not have applied for a certain role to be like, you know what, like when you interview, think of maybe switching roles of the person. So that aspect in a more organic way that is not too heavy, I find like could have been or should be in the future more simple in a way to move the change.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. My only comment is that you just have to make sure that when you hire those women that you've interviewed more of, they are working at a place that welcomes them. and is supportive of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's a question today. The women who are hired, they face a sort of gossips around about their they have been hired because they are women, they are not competent, and so on. And they heard that, and they say, okay, I quit. And this is a difficulty. At La Poste, for example, we don't hire women because they are women. We ask to have for a job description CVs from women and other from men, and not only, especially for top positions, only CVs from men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this whole messages and I think that's the good news. So for me, the good news where we are today is there is less bullshit, there is less performative work, and people who really care will come to the bat to play. Yep. So now is a great time to actually work in that space, connect it with the business line, and move away from a kind of perceptual aspect of DEI as charity work to actually DEI as a business work. And one of the points that I would like to talk a bit more about now is the financial return of DEI. You talked a bit about the 30%. The innovation benefits of having more diverse voices, and also diversity beyond just gender, etc., but the cultural and neurodiversity that brings actually tangible value. I don't know if you had some experience in your companies where you had some highlights or some examples that you would like to share with us. Maybe Emily?
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this. Hugging Face is much smaller than a lot of people think. We're only about 225 employees, but one of our biggest strengths is that we're actually in almost 30 countries. We're a remote-first company. We're fully global. I really, really love the fact that I can talk to one of my colleagues at any point in the day and not know where in the world they're located. It's a pretty neat perk that also comes with all of the innovation possibilities that Elias mentioned. One of the first things that I did when I joined Hugging Face almost 4 years ago was, again, to your point, remove our DEI channel from our Slack, right, our work messaging platform, because what that was doing was it was centralizing conversations about DEI in one place, and the only people that were looking at those conversations were the people that cared about DEI. And what we wanted is actually, as you said, to decentralize these conversations and move them into our sales chat, into our hub building chat, right? Talk about how do we make our website more accessible, and talk about that in the chat where we're talking about the website as opposed to in the DEI chat. And I've seen great examples of conversations happening. I can use the accessibility as an example where, because it's happening in Slack and because our Slack is open to all employees, these conversations include engineers, they also include ethicists, they include accessibility experts, they include office managers, and they include people from all over the world, which means we're getting so many perspectives. It means we're actually building a pretty great product. And then we triple down, because we're open source, it means we get lots of great feedback from everybody in the world also, that really helps us to innovate faster, stronger, better than companies that are closed down.
I love that. And I love this aspect of having a distributed approach to diversity in general. And we talk a lot about empowerment, but the base of empowerment is empowering the existing teams and the people who are already diverse. And to your point of the hiring, it's yeah, you can be diverse, but if all your hires are let's say women in marketing or women in HR or the immigrants in the front line and etc., you're missing the point. And even more so, you create that kind of fracture. So I love this idea of, and I think I never thought of it, so thank you, of having a distributed aspect and almost like a web, a hub. A hub, but interconnected mini clusters within teams and empowering those people and making it pervasive. Pervasive, I wouldn't say, So it has a ripple effect, okay.
It's the same when at the beginning we saw big companies naming or hiring the director of diversity, which was compulsory from ethno-cultural background, just as if it's only them who are aware of the problem. And no, everybody can be aware of the problem. But the image you are bringing on the table is that don't be afraid. It's just their problem. It's not yours. And this kind of things gives a bad formulation for this question or the issue of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why moving ahead, and that's why I say like it's a good news in a way. Like everything that is happening today, because it's like a Band-Aid. We put a Band-Aid on something that was wrong, and we went to a party and we felt that we were okay. Now we're ripping off the Band-Aid. We're kicking off a lot of the bullshit because we collectively, anyone who has been involved into DEI over the last 10 years, has also been involved into this performative work, hiring or creating a department of DEI, like the dumbest idea. And you couldn't even antagonize against that because people like me who would say, no, this is dumb, it's not ingrained into the business lines or the technology department, they would be like, are you racist? I'm like, no, I think that it should be empowering the teams, not creating, as you rightly said, Fatiha. So I think moving forward, it's a good thing. Now, when there is no policy, which I believe it's a good thing, personally, when there is no department of DEI, which I personally think is a good thing, and to your example of distributed aspect. Now, how do you see we can bring allies, because more than ever, allies will be key. When there is no compulsory, you cannot just like put lipstick on a pig, you still need like to get that movement towards change. So how do you see getting those allies to join or getting more work towards increasing allyship? And what is for you allyship, first and foremost?
For me, allyship is all people which are already convinced of the necessity to work on the question of diversity of gender or ethno-cultural background, and to make them help us to change the situations in the company. And take the word and speak and help people to understand the situation, to bring another way of viewing the situation, and to, when we are, for example, when we are in a meeting, to make people listen to the proposal of this person who is maybe diverse in comparison with others.
What about you, Emily?
Yeah, I fully agree. We touched on the topic of amplification or sponsorship a little bit, which I think is a good illustrator of this point, because my take is that allyship needs to be rooted in action, right? We can't just believe these things are true. We have to take actions to support folks. And one of the ways that we discussed that's really useful in supporting folks that Fatiha mentioned is this amplification piece, right? So if your colleague is from an underrepresented group, particularly an underrepresented group in tech, has a great idea and nobody's listening, especially if you hold some power in the situation, just repeat it. And be like, hey, did everyone see what Emily said? That was awesome. That can actually be really, really effective. And so I just think that what you said is exactly right. I'll go back to the web, this distributed web. It's a great concept, and I do think it works, but it does require a lot of people to take a lot of actions, and a lot of small actions in order for the web to work. One of the ways that I think the web supports itself is that one reason why people don't take action, particularly on emotional topics, is that they're nervous. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They haven't taken action before. And what this web does is it gives lots of these mini little examples of other people taking action and other people being allies. That way you can gain confidence in your own allyship.
We have to move from mentorship to sponsorship. People must be really involved in this question and help the other to go to the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on my end, and I love the moving from mentorship to sponsorship, because I do believe that sometimes mentorship creates this distance that can keep the status quo, actually, of dependency, etc. But I think like time has changed, and especially now, what we see today with AI going at the speed of light, the changes in the innovation landscape, as well as the geopolitical landscape that has changed over the last year. I won't say why, but like that has changed over the last year. But on the bright side is we see what we used to call like the global south, like Africa, Middle East, India, etc., going fast, being actually more steady. We see countries like Morocco, Saudi, Qatar, Emirates, India as well, who has been very stable for many years. Like Morocco has plans for like 20 years. And their innovation strategy, their capital, their investments, like we see steady movement that are compound interest. So like every effect of every year compounds to the next. They're not like that, those big swings that can happen in the US, for example. And those are actually becoming very interesting innovation partners, market partners, but also capital partners. Because we see countries like Morocco has OCP, for example, like it's a big phosphate resources. We have Saudi, obviously, have resources, etc. And they are investing in the future beyond natural resources. And guess what? Europe, Canada, I live in Canada, has huge amounts of immigrants, have huge amounts of people from this diaspora who are living here. We're in France, we're in Paris. Look at this room full of diverse people. And I believe we're not capitalizing on that. I believe the allyship needs to be rooted into this opportunistic view that is actually a tangible one. Like a new market, new capital, new commerce, new talent, etc. that we have to seize now. And now is the time to actually seize it.
Yeah, because diaspora can build bridges with their country of origins. And they know the culture, they understand the way of living, acting, the things interesting for their origin countries, even if they are not born in these countries, but they know the culture and they can help for the business in these countries. And I mean, it's really a question of business, and some companies have understood this, and they have, and today they use their diaspora to bring the ideas in other countries and to build bridges with other countries.
Yeah, I love what we're talking about, how the countries that you don't normally think of as the big players in the game, as you mentioned, are innovating and oftentimes leading some of the AI race. And my only like tiny pushback in terms of, not even a pushback, I just want to be really careful when framing this conversation, because it toes the line between partnership with these organizations or these other countries to almost like an extractive relationship, right? I don't want to think of folks outside of France, the US, Canada, the EU as resources for us to be pulling innovation from. It's just like, these are humans, and they're doing amazing work, and it might as well, they would be much better partners than in that case. I think of some like multi-language models that have been, I think, very successful in doing this work, including Hugging Face's Bloom model, if folks are familiar. It's an open access, open science, multi-language model where we worked with countries all over the world, had contributors all over the world, because we were noticing that large language models were tending much more toward Western languages. We wanted to include other people. If anyone is familiar, Cohere Labs, they have an AYA, I'm not sure how to say it, project happening right now where they are focused on the world's least spoken languages, which is just really outrageously cool. And they've got paid contractors from all over the world helping them with this open source project. I'd recommend you take a look at it. And these are just great examples of like more resourced companies like partnering in a way that makes sense with folks who are leading in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about this aspect of having paid contractor or having players even in their own home countries, and I like take a moment to think about it. And I like what you said about, even though I don't always agree on what we share together, and that's I like actually, but on the aspect of working with people even where they are. You know, like Hugging Face is a company of 200 and something people. They're all remote in many, many countries. But guess what? You can let people live in their countries, contribute to a company, to their growth, live in their country, trickle down economics in their own area, in a way. And that's actually working one, while empowering the local ecosystem and helping potentially ingrain that culture of speed, Silicon Valley style startup way of moving fast, etc., or New York style, whatever, Paris style, in their own countries. And that's actually a net positive in their local economies as well. And that we don't always think about it, and this is really, really crucial. Second point is, actually the West doesn't have a choice. And I don't mean it in an arrogant way. But innovation, more and more, will require data, will require AI, obviously, and that requires the diversity of point of views, both on the innovation standpoint, but also on a very technical, basic thing. Like, for example, even iPhone, when they first had their camera, didn't know how to recognize Asian people. And it was like assembled in China. Like, it's crazy. Like, this is dumb. But this is like the obvious dumb. But now we're going into the nitty-gritty of nuanced aspects that are actually required. And there are countries, like, for example, I was talking about OCP earlier. They have UM6P, that is like a university around science and research. They have a campus here in Paris.
In AI.
AI, agriculture, climate, etc. But they're also opening in Canada now. So those countries, and Saudi and others, like I don't know everyone very well. I'm from Morocco originally, so it's easier for me. But even countries like Morocco that are connected with Africa are coming to the West, want partnership. So to your point of like extractive, I think we have a beautiful opportunity for true, genuine, mutually beneficial partnership. And we have countries from the global South who actually are building those bridges. So I hope that the West, in a way, and I think that we are, a lot of leaders, and especially now, now that the noise is left, we have the real leaders that are left to actually do the work and build that bridge back to Africa, etc. And I see it on a day-to-day basis, so I'm very, very, very hopeful about what's coming up. Maybe like just to finish on that, like, what would you like to see now that there is no more policy pushed through the throats of everyone, now that we have potential partnership, and I think between France in Europe, Canada in North America, Africa as well, what would you like to see the audience to take home potentially as an action? Just one action, not like 30, like one example of action that they
potentially bring home.
Big question, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm leaving
No, I don't know if I have an action, but I have a conviction, and I want to share it with everybody here. Diversity is not a matter of, it's not a question of charity. It's a question of justice, equity, and business. So think about it, and you will see the things differently.
Coming back to the decentralized DEI, I would encourage folks in their own organizations, especially if you're not working in a DEI related job, look for allies in your company or on your team and start to build that web that we talked about a little bit earlier, because the more folks that you can have who are talking about DEI, who are sponsoring colleagues, who are supporting hard conversations, the more impact that you can have regarding these topics. And so I think the action could just be as simple as finding a friend at your company and saying, hey, let's start having some hard conversations and we can support each other through this, because 2 becomes 4, becomes 12, becomes 100.
Movement.
And then you build your own organization's movement.
And make sure that when you reach out in diversity that goes beyond just gender and color, culture, rainbows, and neurodiversity as well. And for me, like one of the aspects, and I really believe that it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, this connection with Africa, Middle East, and the beauty in most of the teams here is that you have already diversity. So take the time. We did that with Elan Tech, like the organization where I work, where we are a small organization, 8 people, not 200, but it's 7 different countries, and that came naturally because of the way we are, the authenticity, the work, and we help founders connect among each other. So in Canada, and now more and more in Europe, in Morocco, etc. But that connection, leading the hand and sharing with someone with humility to learn and to share, helps us actually have a better understanding of that multi-billion-dollar opportunity, or multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. So do that in your own teams, do that with your own folks, and go around. If you're a founder, find another startup that has founders who are diverse, work with them, learn from them, and you'll see that you understand better markets that you may not have seen the insights and opportunities there. Anyway, thank you very, very much, Emily. Fatiha, it was a pleasure sharing today, and I hope that we learned towards action together. Thank you.
Thank you.